What if Naruto traveled to Hunter x Hunter universe? Part 10. Naruto watched him go, a soft, satisfied smile on his face as he patted his full stomach. Well, with Sasuke on guard, we could sleep through a volcanic eruption and be completely fine. I'm hitting the sleeping bag. Tomorrow's gonna be a long walk, believe it. Up on the high stone arch, the air was cold. The violet-hued spatial draft from the vault below occasionally whistled through the ruins, carrying a faint, electric hum. Without a sound, a pale figure appeared beside Sasuke. Killua leaned against the crumbling pillar, his hands tucked casually into his pockets. He didn't look at the Uchiha. Instead, his blue eyes scanned the dark, dense perimeter of the upside-down jungle stretching out beyond the temple gates. "You're quiet," Killua remarked, his voice barely a whisper, yet perfectly audible in the dead silence of the vault. Even for a guy who looks like he carries the weight of the world on his shoulders. Sasuke didn't move his head. His single visible eye remained fixed on the horizon, where the unnatural gravity of the dark continent warped the very silhouette of the treetops. "There's nothing to say. I'm here to ensure the Dobi doesn't get himself killed in a world he doesn't understand." Killua let out a quiet, amused huff. "He's not going to get killed. He's an idiot, but he's a tough one. Besides, Gon and I have his back." Sasuke shifted slightly, his gaze dropping to the silver-haired kid. He had felt the residue of Killua's lightning earlier, not just the physical discharge, but the cold, clinical precision behind it. It was the movement of someone trained to kill before they were taught to speak. "You have the eyes of an assassin," Sasuke said flatly, "and a body conditioned to withstand lethal current. Your clan must have been pleasant." Killua's posture didn't change, but his eyes narrowed just a fraction. A faint, cool breeze seemed to pass between them. "They were a nightmare. I spent my whole childhood being tortured just to build up a tolerance to poison and electricity. I ran away the first chance I got. HMPH. Sasuke turned his gaze back to the dark forest. "Then you understand. Having power you never asked for, forced upon you by a legacy you had to break." "Yeah," Killua murmured, looking down at his own hands, which were sparking with tiny, idle blue needles. "But Gon helped me realize I don't have to be what they made me. I can use this strength to protect the people I actually care about." "I get the feeling Naruto did something similar for you." Sasuke was silent for a long moment. The campfire far below crackled, sending a tiny spray of orange sparks drifting up into the weightless void of the vault. "He's a fool," Sasuke said softly, the edge in his voice fading into something ancient and deeply quiet. "But he's a persistent one. He doesn't let you drown in your own darkness, even when you beg him to let you go." Killua smiled, a genuine, small expression that made him look like a normal kid again. "Sounds like him. He's annoying like that." "He is," Sasuke agreed, the faintest ghost of a smirk touching his lips. "Get some sleep, kid. I'll handle the watch. Tomorrow, this continent is going to try to test us, and I have no intention of letting it succeed." "Fine by me," Killua said, pushing himself off the pillar and dropping silently back down toward the warm glow of the tent. "Don't let the gravity bugs bite." The next morning, the vertical jungle of the hollow horizon didn't just challenge their balance. It shattered their concept of geometry. Giant, moss-covered trees grew horizontally out of colossal cliff sides, their roots wrapping around floating islands of ancient stone. Waterfalls flowed upward in massive, shimmering blue ribbons, defying gravity to feed into clouds that hovered beneath the valley floor. "Watch your step," Jing called out from the lead, his boots finding traction on a massive, horizontal trunk. "We're entering a heavy flux zone. The gravity here shifts every 90 seconds, and the local predators know the exact rhythm." Right on cue, a deep, rhythmic thrumming vibrated through the air. From the dense, upside-down canopy above, a swarm of massive, armored arachnids, each the size of a carriage, with hard, obsidian-like exoskeletons and glowing purple eyes, dropped straight down. But they weren't falling. They were running along the shifting gravitational lines, moving with terrifying, erratic speed. "They're fast," Gon yelled, his hand already gathering a brilliant, spinning aura. "Killua, on your left." "I see 'em." Kahlua sparked, his body instantly entering Godspeed as he vanished in a streak of blue lightning, intercepting the lead beast in midair. But the swarm was too massive. Dozens of the beasts launched themselves from the blind spots of the shifting gravity wells, aiming directly for the center of their formation. Naruto, Sasuke said, his voice a cool, level anchor amidst the chaos. Yeah, Naruto grinned, his lazy slouch vanishing instantly. Let's show him how we do things back home. The legendary duo moved in perfect, terrifying synchronization, a rhythm forged in the fires of a global war, requiring no words, no planning, and no hesitation. Naruto crossed his fingers, instantly summoning 3 shadow clones. 2 of the clones dashed forward, their hands extended as they began violently molding a massive, swirling sphere of blue energy, while the real Naruto flared into his glowing orange Nine Tails chakra mode. The warm, blinding light cut through the violet gloom of the jungle like a miniature sun. Sasuke's left eye flared, the concentric rings of his Rinnegan spinning in perfect focus. With a soft shring, Sasuke drew his Kusanagi blade, the steel instantly crackling with high-frequency, dark blue Chidori lightning. He tracked the swarm, calculating the precise vectors of their trajectory. Aminate Hikara. In a literal millisecond, Sasuke swapped places with a falling leaf right in the center of the largest cluster of arachnids. Chidori's sharp spear, a massive blade of pure lightning erupted from Sasuke's sword, bisecting 3 of the armored beasts in a clean, vertical flash. But before the remaining creatures could react to his sudden displacement, Naruto was already there. Sasuke, heads up! Naruto roared. Without looking, Sasuke leapt backward into a gravity-neutral pocket. The moment he cleared the space, Naruto's shadow clones launched the massive, spinning vortex forward. Sage Art. Wind Release Rasen Shuriken. The giant, bladed star of pure wind chakra shrieked through the air, expanding violently as it hit the remaining swarm. The vacuum pull of the attack dragged the armored beasts out of their gravity lines, shredding their obsidian carapaces into harmless dust in a spectacular, blinding dome of blue light. One surviving giant arachnid, desperate and enraged, lunged from a blind spot directly behind Naruto, its venomous stinger raised. Zip! Before it could even descend, Sasuke appeared directly above its head, his sword coated in lightning. With a single, fluid downward thrust, he pinned the beast to the stone, the electric current frying its neural system instantly. He landed smoothly on the horizontal trunk, his cloak settling around his shoulders without a speck of dust on it. He sheathed his sword with a soft, metallic click. "You're getting slow, Dobi," Sasuke said, his voice flat, though his eye glinted with that familiar, competitive spark. "You almost let one touch you. Hey, I had my sensory grid on, ya bastard. I was just about to kick it." Naruto yelled, his orange chakra shroud flicking off as he crossed his arms and pouted. "You just wanted to steal my spotlight." Gon and Kahlua landed nearby, both of them staring at the smoking, empty space where an entire swarm of S-class Dark Continent predators had existed just 10 seconds prior. Jing walked up, his hands shoved into his pockets, a slow, dazed laugh escaping his lips as he looked at the shattered forest. "Well," Jing said, shaking his head in absolute, joyous defeat. "I guess we don't have to worry about the Vanguard anymore. You two really are a cheat code." "Hey, we're not a cheat code. We're just highly coordinated," Naruto protested, puffing his cheeks out as his glowing shroud completely receded, leaving him in his standard orange jacket. He pointed a thumb at Sasuke. "And besides, this guy is always trying to show off. He's been like this since we were 12. You're the one who insisted on using a giant, noisy wind blade to clear out simple pests," Sasuke remarked, casually adjusting his empty left sleeve as he walked past Naruto. "A simple lightning needle would have sufficed. You have no concept of energy conservation. It's called style, Sasuke. Style." Kahlua let out a dry, crackling laugh, his Godspeed sparks fading as his hair settled back down. "Actually, I'm with the brooding guy on this one. That giant spinning buzzsaw of yours is awesome, Naruto, but it's basically a giant dinner bell for every predator within 50 miles. Look at the canopy. They all looked up, or rather, sideways, given the warped horizontal gravity of the ravine. The massive, twisted trees of the hollow horizon were silent now, but the distant, echoing screeches of other exotic beasts suggested that the entire sector had just registered the massive spike of foreign chakra. Gon, however, wasn't looking at the trees. He was staring at the ground where Sasuke's Aminatehi Kara had just triggered. His eyes were wide with that familiar, intense curiosity. Sasuke. Gon hopped over, landing lightly on the horizontal trunk beside him. When you swapped places with that leaf, I didn't see any aura move. It wasn't like a physical dash. The leaf just became you. Is that a spatial contract? Sasuke paused, looking down at the kid. He recognized that look. It was the same look Naruto used to get when he was trying to figure out a complex tactical maneuver. Only Gon's eyes held a strange, wild instinct that felt more like a predator tracking prey than a shinobi studying jutsu. It's called a Minatehi Kara, Sasuke said, his tone measured. My left eye allows me to shift the relative space between myself and any object within my field of vision. It doesn't require travel time. It is instantaneous. So if I threw a stone at you, you could swap with the stone? Gon asked, his hand already drifting to his pocket. Yes. That's so cool. Gon's face lit up. Could you swap with a person's clothes? Or a weapon they're holding? If they are within range, yes, Sasuke replied, a subtle, approving nod of his head acknowledging the kid's quick tactical grasp. Though it requires precise timing and burns a considerable amount of ocular energy if used repeatedly over long distances. Don't encourage him, Sasuke, Killua groaned, walking up and placing a hand on Gon's shoulder to keep him from immediately trying to test the theory with a game of catch. He'll have you swapping him into the mouth of a giant monster just to see if he can punch it from the inside. I would not. Gon laughed, though his grin suggested he had definitely just thought about it. Jing, meanwhile, had walked over to one of the severed legs of the giant arachnid. He nudged the heavy, obsidian-like armor plating with his boot, watching the faint, violet glowing blood slowly dissolve into steam under the harsh natural light of the ravine. The shells on these things are incredibly dense, Jing said, his voice turning serious as he looked down the long, twisting canyon path. Standard physical strikes from a pro hunter wouldn't even dent them. You'd need specialized emission-type Nen or a ridiculous amount of raw kinetic force to crack the carapace. But your wind blade didn't just crack it, it shredded the molecular bonds. Jing looked back at Naruto, his dark eyes gleaming under his messy hair. Your wind chakra isn't just moving air, is it? It's millions of microscopic blades cutting at a cellular level. Hey, you catch on fast, old man, Naruto grinned proudly, crossing his arms. Yeah, that's the secret. If you don't use shape transformation and nature alteration at the same time, it's just a big ball of wind. But once you add the cutting edge, nothing can really block it. A perfect physical shredder paired with a spatial teleporter, Jing muttered, a wild, sharp grin breaking through his scruffy beard as he looked ahead. Yeah, we're definitely going to make it to the central core by sunset. Come on, kids. Let's keep moving before the local fauna realizes we've turned their hunting ground into a playground. They pressed onward, the trail plunging deeper into the vertical canyon where the gravity didn't just shift, it danced. Every 100 yards, the orientation of their weight would yank 90 degrees to the left, then flip entirely upside down. For Gon, Killua, and Jing, navigating this was a masterclass in Nen control, constantly redirecting their aura to their boots to stick to the vertical rock faces like mountain goats. For Naruto and Sasuke, however, it was just Tuesday. Man, this brings back memories, Naruto said, casually walking horizontally along a sheer cliff face as if he were taking a stroll down the main street of Konoha. He had his hands locked behind his head, his body completely perpendicular to the vertical drop below him. Remember when Kakashi-sensei made us climb those trees without using our hands? I kept falling on my face. You fell on your face because your control was atrocious, Dobi, Sasuke said. He was walking beside Naruto, his steps perfectly measured, his cloak hanging straight down toward what was currently the wall of the canyon. You spent 3 days wasting chakra while Sakura mastered it on her first try. Hey, I got it eventually, and my chakra pool was way bigger than hers, so it was harder to balance, okay? Naruto huffed, crossing his arms and pouting sideways at his rival. Hey, look, Gon called out, pointing ahead. He was currently standing on the ceiling of a massive stone archway that spanned the canyon. Directly beneath them, or above them, depending on the current gravity wave, the canyon opened up into a colossal, hollow bowl. At the very center of the bowl, suspended in midair by swirling currents of raw, golden-violet energy, was a massive, glowing root. It looked like the taproot of a world tree, pulsing like a slow, ancient heart. The central vein, Jing said, dropping down from a horizontal branch and landing lightly on the underside of the arch beside Gon. His eyes were wide, reflecting the golden glow of the pulsing root. This is the primary pipeline of natural energy for this entire sector of the Dark Continent. It draws life from the deep earth and purifies it, keeping the spatial borders from collapsing. But as they drew closer, Sasuke's Rinnegan spun, his posture instantly stiffening. Stop, Sasuke? Naruto asked, his sensory grid snapping to high alert. The root isn't pulsing naturally, Sasuke said, his voice dropping into a cold, dangerous register. The flow of energy is blocked. Look at the base. Through his single eye, the world shifted into a spectrum of raw energy vectors. Swirling around the golden root was a thick, oily black mass, not a beast, but a parasitic, ancient substance that seemed to eat the very light around it. It was a localized manifestation of the Dark Continent's absolute corruption, slowly suffocating the vein. That's, Jing's breath hitched, his analytical mind instantly identifying the threat. That's a remnant of the Great Calamity. If that parasite chokes the vein completely, the entire valley will collapse into a permanent spatial void. Well, then it's a good thing we brought the ultimate cleaning crew, Naruto said, a fierce, confident grin breaking across his face. He looked at Sasuke, his blue eyes flashing. You ready, bastard? Sasuke didn't answer with words. He simply drew his Kusanagi blade, the dark blue Chidori lightning instantly crackling along the steel, humming in perfect harmony with Naruto's surging golden chakra. Let's get to work. The transition from a relaxed, bickering stride to absolute combat sync was seamless. 1 second Naruto was lazily complaining about his back, and the next, he was a streak of blinding, golden lightning rushing straight down the vertical cliffside. Gon, Killua, hold the perimeter. Jing ordered, his iron staff slamming into the stone arch as he anchored his own massive, crimson nen to stabilize their footing against the pulsing gravity shifts. If that parasite gets desperate, it's going to shed its outer layers to find new hosts. On it, Gon yelled, his fist already glowing with a dense, spinning concentration of aura. Don't let a single drop of that black gunk touch the ground. Killua barked, his body crackling with Godspeed as he positioned himself on a floating island of stone directly below the root. As Naruto plummeted toward the central core, the oily, black mass surrounding the golden root sensed the approaching heat. It violently convulsed. Dozens of thick, tendril-like lances shot out from the parasite, their tips hardened into razor-sharp, obsidian-like points designed to pierce and drain the life force of any living thing. Too slow, Naruto roared. With a thought, 3 golden chakra arms erupted from his back, catching the incoming tendrils midair and violently twisting them. At the same moment, Sasuke appeared, not by running, but by instantly swapping places with a drifting piece of ash right in the path of the parasite's main defensive cluster. Aminate Hikara. Sasuke materialized with his Kusanagi sword held high, the pitch-black flames of Amaterasu instantly coating the crackling Chidori on his blade. With a single, fluid horizontal slash, he unleashed a crescent wave of black fire and lightning. The black flames, which burn anything they touch until it is completely consumed, immediately clung to the oily parasite. The creature let out a silent, agonizing vibration that shattered the nearby floating rocks. Naruto, now, Sasuke commanded, his Rinnegan tracking the exact point where the parasite's core was trying to retreat deeper into the golden vein to escape the flames. Got it, Kurama, let's clear the path. Inside Naruto's mindscape, the giant, orange nine-tailed beast bared his fangs in a fierce grin. Don't hold back, brat. This thing's energy structure is ancient, but it's nothing our seals can't rewrite. Naruto slammed his palms together. A massive, golden chakra avatar of Kurama's head and shoulders materialized around him, the golden light illuminating the entire canyon like a rising sun. From the jaws of the avatar, a dense, glowing sphere of wind and fire chakra began to rapidly condense, spinning with a deafening, high-frequency scream. Sage Art, Planetary Rasengan. Instead of throwing it, Naruto drove the massive, spinning vortex directly into the center of the flaming parasite. The main, giant sphere hit the core, while the smaller, orbiting Rasengans violently rotated around it, creating an inescapable, chaotic drill of pure kinetic and spiritual force. The combination was devastating. Sasuke's black flames consumed the outer corruption, while Naruto's planetary drill shredded the internal structure of the parasite, preventing it from regenerating. With a final, blinding flash of gold, blue, and black, the parasitic mass was completely vaporized, leaving the giant, ancient root of the world tree entirely clean. The golden-violet energy of the vein instantly surged, pulsing with a healthy, vibrant rhythm that sent a warm, soothing wave of pure natural force washing over the entire valley. The gravity shifts immediately stabilized, locking into a gentle, comfortable state. Naruto floated down, landing lightly on a horizontal branch beside Sasuke. He let out a long breath, wiping a non-existent speck of sweat from his forehead, his giant chakra avatar fading away. Phew, that was actually a pretty good workout, Naruto grinned, turning to Sasuke with his fist held out. Just like old times, huh? Sasuke looked at the outstretched fist, his expression unchanged, but the corner of his mouth twitched upward in a faint, rare smile. He reached out with his single hand and lightly tapped his knuckles against Naruto's. "You're still as noisy as ever," Sasuke murmured. "Hey!" From above, Gon, Killua, and Jing leapt down, landing on the massive branch beside them. Jing looked at the beautifully glowing, purified root, and then at the two shinobi. For once, the legendary hunter had nothing analytical to say. He just smiled, a deep, profound respect in his eyes. "The core of the sector is fully restored," Jing said, resting his hand on Gon's shoulder. "Which means the path to the uncharted interior is wide open. You guys ready to see what else this world is hiding?" "You bet," Gon shouted, his eyes shining. "As long as there's real food along the way," Naruto chimed in, his stomach immediately letting out another loud rumble, ruining the serious moment entirely. They all burst into laughter. Even Sasuke let out a quiet, amused sigh, as the newly purified light of the Dark Continent guided their way forward into the unknown. Jing laughed, a rich, booming sound that bounced off the giant stone archway and echoed through the now stabilized valley. "A god-slaying veteran who can't go 3 hours without a noodle break. Honestly, Naruto, you're the most ridiculous kid I've ever met." "I'm not a kid," Naruto huffed, crossing his arms and looking away dramatically. "And ramen is a refined ninja fuel." Asked Sasuke. "Don't drag me into your culinary delusions," Sasuke said dryly. He sheathed his Kusanagi sword, the faint static of his Chidori finally dispersing into the warm, newly purified air. He looked toward the horizon, where the massive, chaotic vertical jungle was settling into a calm, gentle green. The spatial pressure in the atmosphere has dropped significantly. The natural energy here is finally flowing in a single direction. Killua stepped forward, checking his own palms. The chaotic static electricity that usually danced over his skin under the continent's harsh pressure had calmed down to a smooth, manageable hum. "He's right. My N isn't getting scrambled by the air anymore. It's like the entire sector just took a deep breath. That's because the world tree root is doing its job again," Jing explained, walking to the edge of the branch and looking down into the deep, misty abyss. The golden violet light pulsing from the massive taproot was casting long, peaceful shadows across the horizontal forest. This continent isn't just a lawless wasteland. It's a massive, living system. When one of its organs gets infected by a calamity, the whole region goes crazy. You two didn't just clear a path, you cured the local ecosystem. Gon walked up right next to Jing, his eyes wide as he stared into the glowing depths. Jing, does this mean the creatures here won't be as angry now? Some of them, Jing said, tilting his head back to look at the sky. The ones that were driven mad by the parasitic aura will calm down. But don't get careless, Gon. The apex predators of the Dark Continent don't need a virus to want to eat you. To them, we're still just a very high-energy snack. Good, Gon grinned, his fist clenching with an eager, bright determination. I want to see what they're really like when they're fighting at their best. Spoken like a true idiot, Killua sighed, though his own posture remained relaxed and confident. With Naruto and Sasuke holding the line, the sheer, crushing dread that usually accompanied exploring the Dark Continent had completely evaporated. It felt less like a suicide mission and more like an incredibly high-stakes camping trip. Naruto, meanwhile, had already hopped down from the branch, landing on a flat, floating stone that was now perfectly suspended by the stabilized gravity. He stretched his arms high above his head, letting out a loud yawn. Well, if the path is open, let's get moving, Naruto called back, flashing them his signature, close-eyed grin. The sooner we map this place, the sooner we can find some weird, giant, multi-dimensional ingredients to cook up. I bet the mushrooms here taste amazing. Knowing this place, they'd probably try to eat you from the inside out, Killua muttered, walking after him. Sasuke watched them go, his cloak billowing slightly in the gentle, warm breeze of the purified valley. He glanced at Jing, who was still staring at him with a look of profound, quiet fascination. Are you coming, Hunter? Sasuke asked, his voice cool and level. Jing smirked, adjusting his heavy pack as he leapt down to join the kids. Wouldn't miss it for the world, Uchiha. Lead the way. They moved deeper into the restored valley, the stabilized light guiding their path. The sheer vertical drop of the canyon gradually smoothed out into a sprawling, ancient plateau. Here, the bizarre flora of the Dark Continent seemed to have settled. The horizontal trees gently aligned their leaves toward the sky, and the upward flowing waterfalls subsided into peaceful, misting geysers. Look at that, Gon whispered, pointing toward a massive arch of roots in the distance. Emerging from the undergrowth was a pack of creatures that resembled deer, but their antlers were made of shimmering, crystalline glass that refracted the golden light of the valley. Instead of running in terror or attacking with violent aura, they paused, their glass antlers chiming softly like wind bells as they watched the group pass. They're beautiful, Gon said, his voice filled with awe. He took a step toward them, but Killua caught him by the collar of his jacket. Keep your distance, dummy, Killua muttered, though his tone lacked its usual edge. He, too, was mesmerized by how peaceful the jungle had become. They might look like glass, but those antlers could probably pierce armor if they get startled. Actually, those are siren stags, Jing said, stepping up beside them and adjusting his headwear. Normally, their antlers shatter when they're stressed, releasing a high-frequency vibration that liquefies the internal organs of anything within a mile. The fact that they're just standing there letting us look means the ambient tension in this sector has dropped to near zero. Jing looked over his shoulder at Sasuke, who was walking slightly behind the group, his hand never far from his sword hilt. You really did a number on the atmospheric pressure, Uchiha. Even the local wildlife is thanking you. Sasuke didn't reply, but his single eye swept over the stags. He noticed the tiny, glowing veins of natural energy pulsing through their crystalline antlers, a perfect, harmonious integration with the surrounding world. It reminded him of the pure, uncorrupted natural energy of Mount Myoboku or the Ryuchi Cave, before humanity's wars had stained the land. This world is remarkably quiet when it isn't trying to tear itself apart, Sasuke said softly, almost to himself. Right? Naruto beamed, running ahead a few paces before turning back to face them, walking backward with his hands behind his head. No massive armies, no crazy white-haired guys trying to cast infinite illusions, no endless paperwork waiting at a desk. Just us, a giant forest, and whatever crazy adventure is over the next hill. You're forgetting the part where we're mapping a completely lethal, uncharted continent, Dobi, Sasuke said dryly. Details, details. Naruto waved a hand dismissively. The point is, we're doing it together. And we've got the best squad ever. Jing let out a quiet chuckle, his eyes warm as he watched the three younger boys bicker and laugh. He had spent his entire life running away from the conventional world, chasing the edges of the map to find something that made him feel alive. He had always thought he would have to face the deepest secrets of the Dark Continent alone, or with a crew of hardened, cynical professionals. But looking at Naruto's bright grin, Gon's unyielding determination, Killua's sharp protective instinct, and Sasuke's quiet, formidable strength, Jing realized this was something better. "Hey, Jing," Gon called out, looking back at his father. "Which way do we go now?" Jing stepped forward, pulling a blank leather-bound journal from his pack and a charcoal pencil. He drew a bold, clean line starting from the mirror vault, cutting straight through the canyon, and ending at a brand new symbol, a stylized leaf representing the purified world tree root. "We keep going straight," Jing said, pointing his pencil toward a massive, shimmering mountain range rising in the far distance, its peaks cloaked in shifting, iridescent clouds. "Past this plateau lies the Prism Ridge. If my old notes are correct, that's where the boundary to the next sector begins. And with our current lineup." Jing slid the journal back into his pack, a wild, adventurous grin splitting his face. "I think we're going to make record time." "Then what are we waiting for?" Naruto yelled, turning around and sprinting forward, his bright orange jacket a beacon of warmth against the ancient green of the wild. "First one to the mountains gets the biggest piece of pork belly tonight." "Hey, no head starts," Gon shouted, instantly bursting into a sprint right behind him. "You idiots are going to trigger a trap." Killua yelled, though he was already channeling a light current of electricity through his legs to easily overtake them both. Sasuke watched the three of them disappear into the trees, his cloak catching the light breeze. He let out a soft, resigned sigh, but as he stepped forward to follow, his stride was light, his single hand resting easily at his side. The Dark Continent was vast, dangerous, and full of ancient terrors, but as they marched toward the shimmering peaks of the Prism Ridge, the horizon had never looked brighter. "If you three run off a cliff, I am not swapping you back," Sasuke called out, his voice carrying perfectly over the rushing wind. Naturally, none of them listened. Naruto's obnoxious laughter echoed through the canopy, followed immediately by Killua's triumphant shout as a streak of blue lightning flickered through the massive roots ahead, overtaking both Gon and the orange-clad ninja. "Hey, no fair using Godspeed in a footrace, Killua." Naruto's voice drifted back. "That's cheating. It's called utilizing my natural talents, loser." Killua yelled back. "Maybe you should try running faster." Jing walked at a more measured pace, though his stride was long and effortless. He kept his eyes on the ground, noting how the soil here had transitioned from the dead, dusty gray of the corrupted ruins to a rich, deep loam humming with vibrant life. Tiny, bioluminescent fungi clung to the bark of the horizontal trees, pulsing in perfect, synchronized rhythm with the golden violet vein they had just purified. "You know," Jing said, not turning his head as Sasuke walked a half-step behind him, "I've met a lot of powerful people in my life. Monsters, geniuses, leaders of nations. But most of them carry an aura that feels like a warning. It's heavy, suffocating, like they're constantly trying to crush the space around them." Sasuke kept his gaze fixed on the shimmering mountain range ahead. "Power without control is just noise. The Dobi used to be nothing but noise." "Maybe," Jing chuckled, pulling a small canteen from his belt and taking a swig. "But his energy now, it's massive, sure, but it's completely integrated. It feels like the natural world itself." When he flared that golden form back there, the jungle didn't shrink away. It reached toward him. Jing stopped at the edge of a massive overlook. The plateau ended abruptly, dropping into a breathtaking, miles-wide basin. Below them, the forest didn't just grow, it flowed like a river of emerald and teal toward the base of the Prism Ridge. The iridescent clouds swirling around the peaks weren't water vapor. They were shifting curtains of raw, crystallized nen and natural energy, refracting the sunlight into a million dancing rainbows. "That's the barrier," Jing murmured, his analytical eyes widening in appreciation. "A permanent, localized auroral storm." Usually, crossing that would strip the skin right off your bones unless you had a highly specialized defensive shroud. But with you too, my Susanoo can shield the entire group, Sasuke said simply, standing beside Jing. His dark cloak rustled in the cool, crisp mountain air, and Naruto's chakra can heal any minor friction before it registers as damage. The storm won't be an issue. Jing let out a low, whistled breath. Yeah, like I said, a cheat code. Down in the basin, the race had apparently ended. Naruto was currently face down in a patch of soft, glowing moss, groaning dramatically about his knees, while Gon sat next to him, laughing and pointing at Killua, who was perched proudly on a floating rock with his arms crossed. Come on, you two. Gon called up toward the overlook, waving his uninjured arm wildly. The moss down here feels like a mattress. And there are these weird, floating bubble plants that taste like sweet water. Don't eat random plants, Gon. Killua snapped, though he was already poking one of the floating blue bubbles with a finger. Sasuke looked down at the chaotic trio, his right hand resting casually on the hilt of his kusanagi. The wind swept through his dark hair, exposing the quiet, sharp lines of his face. He had traveled through countless barren, terrifying dimensions in his search for Otsutsuki traces, dark, dead worlds stripped of life and warmth. But here, in this strange, hostile, yet vibrant corner of the multiverse, surrounded by loud idiots and impossible landscapes, he felt a rare, quiet sense of purpose. He wasn't just defending a border anymore. He was exploring. Let's go, Sasuke said, his voice quiet but clear. With a single, effortless leap, he drifted down into the basin, his black cloak billowing behind him like the wings of a predatory bird, landing silently right in the middle of the kids' chaotic campsite. Whoa, smooth landing. Naruto grinned, sits up and wiping moss off his nose. All right, Sasuke, now help me start the fire. And don't give me that Mangekyo is too precious excuse again. I know you've got some ordinary matches in that pouch. Sasuke sighed, but his hand already drifting toward his pocket. You are entirely too demanding, Dobi. The ascent to the prism ridge began where the gentle green of the basin abruptly died, swallowed by a sheer wall of iridescent white stone. Above them, the sky was no longer blue. It was a churning, violent sea of neon pink, electric teal, and deep violet, not cloud, but highly pressurized, crystallized natural energy scraping against the mountain peaks like a trillion microscopic diamond saws. The sound was a deafening, metallic shriek that vibrated straight through their teeth. Keep your heads down, Jing yelled over the roar, his crimson nen flared into a tight, dense sphere around himself to deflect the stray, glittering needles of light that constantly broke off from the storm. Even a single stray flake of this stuff will slice clean through standard Ken. If you get caught in a gust, you're mincemeat. This is crazy, Gon shouted, squinting against the blinding, colorful glare as he and Killua stayed glued to Jing's heels. Killua's body was actively humming, his bioelectricity acting as a natural deflector for the static charge filling the air, but his face was tight with concentration. We're crossing now, Sasuke's voice cut through the localized static, cool and entirely unbothered. He stepped to the front of the group, his Rinnegan spinning with sharp, crimson focus. He didn't just see a storm, he saw the complex, overlapping geometric vectors of the razor-sharp energy. With a silent flare of his spiritual force, a sudden, towering ribs and spine cage of deep violet energy erupted around the five of them. Within a fraction of a second, the skeletal structure expanded, molding into the armored, towering form of his Susanoo. The massive, ethereal samurai warrior manifested only from the waist up, its towering form standing like a bulwark against the mountain face. In its giant hands, it held a massive, glowing shield that it planted firmly into the stone, enclosing the group in a flawless, impenetrable sanctuary of violet light. Screech! The violent auroral storm slammed into the Susanoo's shield with the force of a collapsing mountain. Millions of glittering, razor-sharp crystals detonated against the violet armor, sending spectacular showers of multicolored sparks cascading into the abyss below. Inside the barrier, however, the air was perfectly still, silent, and warm. Whoa! Gon gasped, running up to the translucent violet wall of the Susanoo and pressing his face right against it. It's like we're inside a giant purple glass giant. I can't feel the wind at all. Don't touch it, Baka. Kahlua hissed, grabbing the back of Gon's collar and yanking him back. That's raw, concentrated energy. You'll probably lose a hand. Actually, it's perfectly safe, Naruto laughed, walking up and casually leaning his back against the solid violet chakra wall of the Susanoo, flashing them a grin. Sasuke's got total control over it. It only burns the things he wants it to burn. See? He patted the wall with his hand to prove his point. Sasuke didn't look back, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword as he focused on maintaining the massive construct while walking forward. Do not treat my Susanoo as a playpen, Dobi. Keep moving. The pressure is increasing the higher we climb. He's right, Jing said, his eyes scanning the structure of the Susanoo with absolute, unbridled fascination. He reached out, stopping just millimeters short of touching the inner wall, his sensory aura mapping the sheer, ridiculous density of Sasuke's spiritual armor. To shape and maintain something this massive, with this level of structural integrity, against a storm that could shred a mountain, it's mind-boggling. You aren't just projecting aura, Uchiha. This is a solid, localized space. It is the ultimate defense, Sasuke said simply. As they marched upward through the howling, colorful tempest, the storm grew even more violent. Massive blocks of crystallized energy, the size of houses, detached from the upper peaks and came hurtling down the pass like iridescent avalanches. With a smooth, practiced flick of his fingers, Sasuke commanded the Susanoo. The giant violet warrior drew a massive, glowing blade from its side. With a single, silent sweep of the colossal sword, the descending crystalline blocks were cleaved perfectly in half, their shattered fragments dissolving into harmless glowing mist before they could even touch the barrier. Man, you really like to show off, Naruto chuckled, walking comfortably beside Sasuke. I could have just wrapped us all in a giant Kurama bubble, you know. It's way warmer. Your orange beast is too loud, Naruto, Sasuke replied smoothly, his eye narrowing slightly as they neared the crest of the ridge. And your chakra lacks the precision needed to slice the crystallization vectors. You would have just tried to brute force the storm. Hey, brute force works. It's worked for me my entire life. Jing let out a low, amused chuckle, looking through the translucent violet shield at the peak just ahead. The storm was beginning to thin, the chaotic colors parting to reveal a completely new, breathtaking landscape on the other side of the ridge. Get ready, boys, Jing said, his voice dropping into that deep, thrilled tone of a hunter about to touch the edge of the world. We're crossing the boundary. As they stepped over the crest, the violent shriek of the auroral storm died instantly, replaced by a sudden, heavy silence that made everyone's ears pop. Sasuke let the towering violet armor of his Susanoo dissolve into a soft mist of purple sparks that quickly scattered in the crisp air. He stood at the edge of the ridge, his cloak settling back around his shoulders, his single eye instantly scanning the horizon of the new sector. Below them lay the Valley of Whispers. Unlike the wild, chaotic vertical jungle or the jagged prism ridge, this new territory looked like an endless, rolling sea of towering, silver-white pampas grass. The grass stood over 12 feet tall, swaying in slow, mesmerizing waves under a pale lavender sky. But there was no wind. The movement of the grass was self-inflicted, a slow, coordinated ripple that looked unnervingly like breathing. Whoa! Gon stepped up to the edge, his nose instantly twitching. It smells like old paper. And rain. Be careful, Kahlua warned, his hand drifting to his pocket. He was already dropping his stance, his muscles coiling. My N is hitting a wall. It's not getting scrambled like before, it's just disappearing. The moment my aura stretches past 10 feet, it feels like it's getting sucked into the ground. Jing stepped forward, kneeling down to touch the strange, silver soil of the ridge's descent. He picked up a handful, watching the fine, metallic sand slip through his fingers. The soil is saturated with a heavy dampening mineral, Jing said, his scruffy face hardening with intense focus. This is the silence sector. The grass here reacts to sound and high-frequency energy. If you make a loud noise, or if you flare your aura too brightly, the grass will violently compress, creating a localized vacuum that can collapse your lungs in a second. Naruto, who had been about to let out a massive, victorious yawn, instantly clamped both hands over his mouth. His eyes went wide as saucers as he looked at Jing, slowly nodding in terror. MMH. Naruto mumbled through his hands. Yes, Dobi, that means you have to keep your mouth shut, Sasuke said dryly, though his own voice was barely a low murmur. He adjusted his stance, his Rinnegan quietly tracking the faint, invisible currents of silent energy drifting just above the silver grass. The natural energy here is stagnant. It isn't dead, but it's compressed. Like a spring waiting to be released. Exactly, Jing whispered, standing up and brushing the silver sand from his palms. He gestured to a narrow, winding path that cut through the towering white stalks. We move on foot, in single file. No running, no shouting, and absolutely no flashy chakra or nen unless it's a life or death emergency. If we need to communicate, keep it to hand signs or whispers. Gon nodded eagerly, his eyes shining with the thrill of the silent challenge. He looked at Killua, who gave him a sharp, confident thumbs up. Naruto slowly lowered his hands, letting out a tiny, exaggeratedly quiet breath. He leaned toward Sasuke, his voice dropping to a barely audible squeak. Hey, Sasuke. Can we at least eat some dried pork belly while we walk? My stomach is gonna make a loud noise if I don't put something in it, and I don't want the grass to eat me because my guts growled. Sasuke let out a soft, exasperated sigh, reaching into his pouch to toss a small, wrapped piece of dried meat directly into Naruto's open mouth. Eat and be quiet, you idiot. With a muffled, highly satisfied grin, Naruto began to chew happily. Jing led the way down the slope, his steps completely silent as they entered the towering, breathing silver grass. The deeper they went, the more the outside world seemed to vanish, leaving only the soft, rhythmic rustling of the stalks and the quiet, coordinated steps of 5 legendary travelers stepping into the deep unknown. The silver grass towered over them, casting long, pale shadows that smelled faintly of static and dust. Each step required absolute, deliberate control. To Gon and Killua, who had trained extensively in the art of Zetsu, the complete suppression of one's aura, this was a familiar mental exercise. They slipped through the stalks like ghosts, leaving barely a ripple in the silver sea. Naruto, however, was practically sweating. Suppressing his massive, boiling reservoir of Nine Tails chakra to an absolute zero was like trying to keep a volcanic eruption inside a glass jar. He walked with stiff, robotic precision, his eyes darting to the left and right every time a silver leaf brushed against his shoulder. Sasuke walked directly behind him, his step so light he didn't even disturb the metallic sand beneath his boots. His Rinnegan remained active, tracking the invisible, hyper-reactive threads of energy that connected the roots of the grass. Suddenly, a soft, low thrum echoed through the soil. Just 20 yards ahead, the path opened slightly into a small clearing. Crouched in the center of the silver stalks was a creature that looked like a sleek, faceless panther, its skin made of a pitch-black, sound-absorbing velvet. It didn't have eyes, instead, its head was a smooth, concave dish that actively vibrated, scanning the air for the slightest microscopic ripple of sound. A silent stalker. Jing immediately raised a flat hand, signaling the group to halt. He didn't breathe. He didn't even let his heartbeat register a rhythm. The panther-like beast slowly turned its concave head toward them. It felt the air, its velvet ears twitching. Naruto froze. He was holding the last bite of the dried pork belly Sasuke had given him, but in his sudden panic, a tiny crumb of the dried meat slipped from his fingers. Plip. The microscopic sound of the crumb hitting a dry leaf sounded like a thunderclap in the silent valley. Instantly, the surrounding silver grass violently shrieked, the stalks snapping together like a massive, automated steel trap. The vacuum pressure in the air spiked, suddenly dragging the oxygen directly out of Naruto's lungs. He gasped, his eyes bulging as the air pressure threatened to collapse his ribcage. The silent stalker lunged, moving with absolute, silent speed, its jaws open in a vacuum-inducing maw. Before Jing or Killua could even drop their weight to spring, Sasuke moved. No sound, no lightning, no visual flash. Aminate Hikara. In a literal blink, the falling leaf 10 feet above the panther swapped places with Sasuke. He materialized in midair, his hand already clamped firmly over Naruto's mouth to prevent him from crying out, while his right hand smoothly drew his Kusanagi blade. With a silent, gravity-assisted downward thrust, Sasuke drove the steel blade straight through the skull of the panther-like beast. The sword didn't crackle with Chidori. He used pure, raw physical kinetic force, driving the creature into the silver sand without letting a single vibration escape the impact. The beast dissolved into a puddle of silent, black oil. Sasuke landed on his feet, his left hand still firmly covering Naruto's mouth. He glared at the blonde with a look of sheer, unadulterated exasperation. "If you drop another crumb," Sasuke whispered, his voice so quiet it was practically a vibration in Naruto's ear, "I am going to seal your mouth shut until we reach the next continent." Naruto nodded frantically, his face entirely red as he gave Sasuke a sheepish, apologetic double thumbs up. Killua let out a silent, breathy whistle of relief, while Gon just grinned, pointing to a small, clear path just beyond the puddle of dissolved oil. They were through the first defense of the Silence Sector, but the shimmering mountains of the Prism Ridge still loomed in the distance, waiting for them. Sasuke slowly withdrew his hand from Naruto's mouth. The blonde immediately took a deep, exaggeratedly quiet breath, gulping down the thin, mountain-purified oxygen. He mimed locking his lips with an invisible key and throwing it over his shoulder. Sasuke only responded with a warning glare before wiping his sword clean on a nearby leaf and sheathing it with a slow, completely silent click. Jing stepped over the dissolving puddle of black oil, giving Sasuke a brief, respectful nod of his head. He gestured with 2 fingers, pointing toward a massive, natural tunnel formed by the overlapping roots of giant, petrified silver trees. The path narrowed significantly here, forcing them into a tight, single file line. The air inside the root tunnel was cold and carried a strange, heavy static. On either side, the silver-white pampas grass grew horizontally out of the bark, their feathery tops brushing against each other like thousands of whispering voices. As they walked, Killua noticed that the further they went into the tunnel, the more the background noise of the forest seemed to warp. The soft rustling of the grass began to mimic actual human whispers, faint, overlapping fragments of half-spoken words, just on the edge of comprehension. Gon frowned, his sensitive ears twitching. He leaned slightly toward Killua, his lips barely moving. "Killua, do you hear that?" "Yeah," Killua whispered back, his eyes darting to the shadowy crevices in the roots. "It's an auditory illusion. The grass is absorbing our past movements and throwing them back at us to make us speak. Don't fall for it." Suddenly, a voice echoed softly from the dark ahead. It sounded exactly like Sakura. "Sasuke-kun, Naruto, where are you?" Naruto's entire body tensed. His eyes widened, and he instinctively took a step forward, his mouth opening to shout her name. Before a single sound could escape his throat, a cool, gloved hand caught him by the shoulder. Sasuke stepped up beside him. He didn't look at Naruto, but his Rinnegan was spinning slowly, casting a faint lavender glow over Naruto's face. The ocular genjutsu instantly cleared the illusion from Naruto's mind, snapping him back to reality. "It is a trap, Dobi." Sasuke's voice was a barely audible vibration, direct and grounding. "Focus on my chakra, block out the rest." Naruto blinked, his blue eyes clearing. He let out a silent, grateful breath, nodding slowly. Jing, leading the vanguard, stopped at the exit of the root tunnel. The silver pampas grass finally parted, revealing a breathtaking sight. They had reached the far edge of the Silence Sector. Ahead of them lay a colossal, deep blue stone bridge spanning a massive, bottomless chasm. Beyond the chasm, the towering peaks of the Prism Ridge rose majestically into the sky, their iridescent auroral clouds swirling like silent, colorful halos around the summits. But the bridge wasn't empty. Sitting perfectly still in the center of the bridge was a massive, ancient stone sentinel, its body covered in glowing blue runes. Unlike the wild beasts they had encountered, This construct was a remnant of an ancient civilization, and it was completely motionless, guarding the only path forward. Jing turned to the group, raising his hand to signal them to halt. He pointed to the sentinel, then to his own ears, and finally to the sky. The Guardian reacts to energy. If they wanted to cross into the next sector, they were going to have to get past a stone giant that could likely hear a heartbeat from a mile away. Jing raised a flat palm, then swept 2 fingers in a low, level line. Stealth. No combat. Kahlua stepped to the front, his expression instantly shifting. The casual, sarcastic kid vanished, replaced by the deadly, emotionless prodigy of the Zoldyck family. He initiated his family's signature assassination technique, Shadow Step. His body seemed to blur, creating a silent, overlapping illusion of multiple figures moving in perfect, rhythmic sync. His boots made absolutely no contact with the ground. He was practically floating over the microparticles of silver dust on the stone bridge. Not even a single grain of sand shifted beneath his weight. He moved first to scout, slipping past the first 50 yards of the bridge like a ghost drifting through a graveyard. The stone sentinel sat cross-legged in the center of the span. Its massive, runic head didn't move, but the glowing blue carvings across its shoulders flickered gently, listening to the ambient hum of the chasm. Kahlua stopped 10 feet from the giant, dropping into a low, completely motionless crouch. He gave a sharp, silent hand signal back to the group. Path is clear, but the air pressure around the giant is volatile. One heavy footstep will trigger a vacuum blast. Jing and Gon went next. Gon, having spent his childhood tracking wild beasts in the forests of Whale Island, moved with an innate, animalistic lightness. He mimicked Kahlua's path, his breathing so shallow it wouldn't have fluttered a feather. Jing followed right behind him, his zetsu so flawless that he literally ceased to exist to the sensory perception of the ruins. That left Naruto and Sasuke. Naruto looked at the narrow, ancient stone bridge, then at his own boots. His massive chakra pool was quiet now, but he was still a loud guy by nature. He took a slow, agonizingly quiet step forward. Skrr. A tiny pebble, no larger than a fingernail, shifted a millimeter under Naruto's soul. The blue runes on the sentinel's shoulders instantly flared to a brilliant, angry white. The giant's stone head began to grind upward, a deep, silent vibration starting to ripple through the bridge. Before the sound could even travel through the stone, Aminate Hikara, Sasuke's Rinnegan spun. In a flash of instantaneous displacement, the tiny pebble under Naruto's boot swapped places with a flat, weightless piece of silver moss from the chasm's edge. At the exact same microsecond, Sasuke swapped himself with the air right beside Naruto, catching the blonde by the collar of his jacket before his foot could fully descend. Sasuke held Naruto suspended in midair, perfectly balanced on a single foot, his own boots making absolutely zero sound as he anchored them both. The sentinel's head paused. The angry white glow of its runes slowly receded back to a calm, deep blue. It settled back into its dormant state, convinced the vibration had been a mere trick of the wind. Naruto let out a slow, trembling puff of air, his eyes wide as he looked up at Sasuke. He mouthed a silent, "Thank you." Sasuke didn't blink. He simply gave Naruto a look that promised a very long, very painful training session on stealth the moment they got back to safety. With a smooth, silent sweep of his arm, Sasuke carried them both forward, his feet finding the exact, sound-dampened footprints Kahlua had mapped out. Within minutes, the 5 of them slipped past the towering stone guardian, crossing the threshold of the deep blue bridge. As they reached the far side, the heavy, oppressive silence of the valley began to lift. A crisp, cool mountain breeze swept over their faces, carrying the clean, sharp scent of snow and ozone. "Man!" Naruto gasped, collapsing onto his knees on the solid, dark stone of the mountain path, rubbing his throat. "I thought my lungs were gonna crawl out of my mouth. That was way scarier than fighting Madara." "That's because you have the stealth of a runaway carriage, Dobi," Sasuke said, sheathing his sword as the quiet tension finally left his shoulders. He looked up at the towering, iridescent peaks of the Prism Ridge. "But we're through." Jing looked back at the bridge, a wide, thrilled grin breaking across his face. Unbelievable, we crossed the silence sector without waking the sentinel. You guys are a work of art. Don't praise him, Jing, Kahlua sighed, dropping his shadow step stance and stretching his arms behind his head with a cracking sound. He nearly got us flattened by a giant stone paperweight because he couldn't keep his feet to himself. Honestly, Naruto, how did you survive as a ninja? Hey, I am a great ninja. Naruto protested, scrambling to his feet and pointing an accusatory finger at Kahlua. I'm the Hokage, the leader of the whole village. Ask Sasuke. I've snuck into highly classified enemy bases before. By turning into a giant, screaming fox and blowing up the front gates, yes, Sasuke muttered, walking right past him. That still counts as infiltration if there's no one left to say I was there. Gon let out a bright, ringing laugh, the sound bouncing off the high rock faces of the mountain path. Now that they were out of the silence sector, the crisp, thin air of the higher altitude felt incredibly refreshing. He looked up at the sky, where the iridescent auroral clouds of the Prism Ridge were swirling in massive, slow-moving spirals. Up close, the lights weren't just colors, they were pulsing sheets of raw, dense energy that occasionally cast a warm, tingling sensation across his skin. Look at the peaks, Jing said, his voice turning serious as he stepped up to the edge of the path, looking up at the towering, crystalline heights. The air is extremely thin up here, and the nen pressure from those clouds is going to get heavier the higher we climb. We're at the final stretch before we cross the ridge into the next sector. How heavy are we talking? Kahlua asked, his eyes narrowing as he adjusted the straps of his pack. Heavy enough that if you don't keep your aura wrapped tight around your skin, the pressure will literally compress your muscles until you can't move, Jing explained. It's a natural test. Only those who have mastered their internal energy can survive the crossing. Sounds like the training we did to get to the top of the world tree, Gon said, a confident grin spreading across his face. Exactly, Jing smiled, looking back at Naruto and Sasuke. But for these two, I doubt the physical pressure is going to be the main obstacle. Sasuke, your eye can see the flow of energy. You see how the paths are twisting up ahead? Sasuke closed his right eye, focusing entirely with his left Rinnegan. The world shifted into a complex, shimmering map of raw power. The mountain path didn't just go up, it was intersected by massive, vertical rivers of pure, raw natural energy cascading down from the clouds like silent, invisible waterfalls. The atmospheric energy is flowing in sheets, Sasuke reported, his tone analytical. If we step into one of those currents without neutralizing it, we'll be swept off the cliff face. It's a literal river of force. Can we cut through them? Naruto asked, his fist cracking as a tiny spark of golden nine-tails chakra leaked from his hand, instantly vaporizing the thin frost on the rocks nearby. Not with raw force, Sasuke said, looking at Naruto with a rare, quiet intensity. We'll have to coordinate. My Rinnegan can find the gaps, but your Sage Mode will have to absorb and ground the excess energy as we cross. We have to act as a lightning rod and a shield at the same time. Naruto's grin returned, wider and more confident than ever. He bumped his fist against his palm. A lightning rod and a shield, huh? Sounds like a classic team-up. Let's do it, Sasuke. All right, Naruto said, his voice dropping into a focused, resonant tone that vibrated through the crisp mountain air. Leave the grounding to me. Sasuke, call the path. Naruto closed his eyes for a single second. When they snapped open, his irises had transformed into a brilliant golden cross, the horizontal slit of the sage combined with the vertical slit of the nine tails. At the same moment, the magnificent, warm glow of six-path Sage Mode erupted around him. He didn't manifest his full, blazing chakra shroud this time. Instead, he kept the energy tightly bound to his body, forming a highly dense, golden aura. Behind his back, 3 black truth-seeking balls materialized, slowly orbiting like miniature planets. Whoa! Gon gasped, taking a half-step back as he felt the sudden, massive shift in the air. The pressure, it's not heavy anymore. It feels like the mountain itself is breathing through him.